Okay, so starting off today's show, you guys know what we do every Tuesday on the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast. We look at every game that happened from the previous week, and I give you guys my 10 top takeaways from the weekend. So without further ado, let's start it off. Boys, hit the music. Observation number 1. Odell Beckham is still really good at football. And I think we were reminded of that on Sunday in his performance against the Dallas Cowboys. We all know Odell is just super athletic, but I feel like sometimes we forget just how athletic he is. And it was so nice and so refreshing to see that kind of performance from the Cleveland Brown wide receiver. That was probably the best game he's ever played in a Cleveland Brown uniform. And I understand it was a gadget play touchdown and another score against a bad Cowboys defense. Like, I get it, but Beckham is still as good as it gets with the ball in his hand. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Cleveland Browns during the first segment of the show. We're also going to go more in detail about what happened with the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm encouraged from what I saw with the Cleveland Browns. I'm not 100% sure that they're a playoff team, but I still think they're super talented, and it is nice to see a team like Cleveland that historically is never good start off their season 3-1. I think Kevin Stefanski deserves a lot of credit for the job that he's done so far since he's taken over as head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Now, their schedule has been a little easy, but they've taken advantage. Many Cleveland Brown teams in the past could have lost a game like they won against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 2, or a game that they barely beat Washington in. You know what I mean? Cleveland has been playing well, and I think their fans should be feeling pretty excited about the current direction of their football team. Observation number 2. Justin Herbert needs to be the starting quarterback of the LA Chargers for the rest of the season. And I don't understand how any Charger fan could have watched that game on Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and think otherwise. I totally understand that Anthony Lynn committed to Tyrod Taylor to be his starting quarterback before the season started, and he played okay week 1. He actually wasn't even very good. They should have lost that game to the Cincinnati Bengals if Randy Bullock could make a field goal. But Justin Herbert, on 10 minutes' notice, almost beat the Kansas City Chiefs. He played very well in that game. He didn't beat Carolina, but he played very well in that game, put up great numbers, really gained chemistry between him and Keenan Allen. And if they hit that hook and lateral play at the end, if Austin Eckler catches that ball, that shovel pass, then they win. And he almost outdueled Tom Brady on Sunday. The Chargers had a 24-7 lead, and that game just quickly turned on a fumble by Joshua Kelly, and Tom Brady and the Patriots were able to take advantage. But I don't understand how any Charger fan, or Anthony Lynn for that matter, could watch that game on Sunday and think that the Los Angeles Chargers are a better football team with Tyrod Taylor under center than Justin Herbert. You know what I mean? Like, Tyrod Taylor, we know what he is. He's been playing football for like 6-7 years now. He was the starting quarterback in Buffalo. He was the starting quarterback in Cleveland, and we know what he is, man. This Charger team has plenty of talent. Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, and I think Anthony Lynn is kind of just, digging his own grave here. This Charger team has to win this year. There's too much talent on it. And even though he may think Tyrod may give him the best shot, I can't see it. Justin Herbert's super dynamic. It's not 1998. Let the kid play. Observation number 3. I've been pretty impressed with Josh Allen. I'm not going to lie. He's been playing much better than I've ever expected him to play. But I still don't take the Bills seriously as a legitimate contender in the AFC to come out until I see him perform against one of the better defenses in football. And if your answer is, Zach, what are you saying? He beat the Rams the other day. He was great. He was great for 2 quarters, maybe 3 quarters. There was a big stretch of that game where Josh Allen just gave you a heart attack after a heart attack. And for me, that is why I ultimately do not trust this Buffalo Bills team in the playoffs. I think the Bills right now are a 10 or 11 win team. They very well may win the AFC East, especially now considering they have a 2-game lead on the New England Patriots. So they're a better team than I've expected. And a lot of that has to do with Josh Allen. He's been playing very well. But at the same time, I want to see him perform against Kansas City or Baltimore or Pittsburgh or New England or Seattle or San Francisco. I want to see him outduel those kind of teams in big games. Beating the Rams at home when you almost blew a 28-point lead and they should have lost if it wasn't for that bogus BS pass interference call. I'm still not buying Buffalo completely yet as a legitimate contender, and we're going to get to that, in the back end, the last segment of today's show, I believe. Yeah, we're going to answer the question of who is the second best team in the AFC, and Buffalo definitely right now, I think, is in that conversation. All I'm saying is that playoff game against Houston last year just really showed me all I need to know about Josh Allen, and even though he's been great in the regular season so far, he's been much better than anyone could have ever expected. Buffalo's schedule has been easy, and I'm not taking them seriously as a legitimate contender until he actually does it against some of the better defenses in the NFL. But I do think Buffalo is about a 10 or 11 win team. Moving on to the next observation, Matt Patricia stinks. Like, honestly, the Detroit Lions are a very talented football team. I think Matthew Stafford is a very talented quarterback. I think Swift and Carrion are two solid running backs. Galladay is a very good receiver. And the bottom line is this. When Jim Caldwell was fired as the head coach of the Detroit Lions in 2017, they went 9-7. And there were a lot of really good players in that locker room. And Matt Patricia basically came in and, cleaned house. He only kept the players that he wanted and the players that he thought fit in. And ultimately, since he's been the head coach of the Detroit Lions, his record just has not been very good at all. They had a 14-point lead against the New Orleans Saints the other day and ultimately couldn't win. That is already their third blown double-digit lead this season. They almost lost to the Lions when they had a the Cardinals, They almost lost to the Cardinals when they had a double-digit lead as well. So Kenny Galladay, Matt Stafford, DeAndre Swift, they have plenty of talent on this team. I like Hawkinson as well, but they just can never get the job done in a big spot. And ultimately, I think that falls on the coach. And I don't think Matt Patricia has any right to be coming out here and to say that I don't think he has any right to come out here and say that we knew this thing was going to take time. What do you mean you knew this thing was going to take time? Your team was 9-7 before you got here. They brought you in to put them over the top. Any coach, new coach coming into the league would really value an opportunity to play and coach Matthew Stafford. He is one of the better quarterbacks in this league. And Matt Patricia, with that quarterback, still couldn't win. His team is 1-3 right now, and they are going absolutely nowhere. They are an absolute disgrace. And if I was a Detroit Lion fan, I would be sick to my stomach. Moving on to the next observation, I'll get into COVID a little bit here. And I was very surprised about how the NFL went in terms of the Steelers-Titans schedule and the Chiefs-Patriot game. And it's very similar to what happened in Major League Baseball, and I'll explain what I mean. Going into the baseball season, each MLB team is carrying like a taxi squad full of guys and replacement players, extra bodies that they're going to bring in case, a COVID outbreak happens or whatever. And what I thought was, as long as you test negative, you're good to go. So if a team like the Tennessee Titans have like a player and a coach test positive, I thought, oh, okay, those players were going to quarantine and it's business as usual. I think what a lot of people are having trouble realizing is it's just, at some point, it's uncontrollable. You have kids going to school. You have to, get groceries and stuff like that. And it was inevitable that COVID was going to enter the league at some point. To be honest, the NFL was really lucky it didn't happen until week 3. And the fact that no other Patriots and no other Chiefs tested positive, that's a really good sign for the league. I just think it was a little bit unfair to the Pittsburgh Steelers that their game against the Tennessee Titans was moved because they had a bye week scheduled. Their schedule now is all shifted around, and they were supposed to play this week. It's not the Steelers' fault that the Titans got COVID. So what I thought was going to happen was, with that, extra squad of players, I just thought, as long as you test negative, you're going to play. But that's not how the NFL is going to do it. And what happens if this happens in week, 15 or week 16? How are you going to make up those games? So it's kind of similar to Major League Baseball. I just really don't like the inconsistency that the NFL is, plans on doing, unless they just make a week 18 or a week 19, which would ultimately screw up the playoffs. So they got lucky this time. I just don't know what happens if this occurs like later in the season, week 15 or 16, when you don't have all this space and flexibility to move the games. Observation number 6. I've been really impressed with Joe Burrow, and I think the Bengals have actually done a really nice job surrounding him with the proper weapons. I understand it was only a week 4 game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but Joe Burrow went toe-to-toe with Carson Wentz in week 3. He went toe-to-toe with Baker Mayfield in week 2. The Cincinnati Bengals almost won that game, and they should have won, or at least went to overtime in week 1 against the Los Angeles Chargers, at home in Cincinnati, albeit, but they're a very talented football team. I think Zach Taylor, he's showing some signs. Maybe he does know what he's talking about in terms of the offensive game plan. Joe Mixon looked really good in this game as well. And I actually think the Cincinnati Bengals right now, when you look at the squad, have some optimism around them under Joe Burrow. I don't really know how good he's going to be. I don't really know what his ceiling is. But if you're a Cincinnati Bengal fan, I actually do think it's pretty reasonable right now to say that Joe Burrow has things trending in the right direction. It sucks that you play in a very hard AFC North with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns, 3 teams that look to be pretty good right now. But against a team like Jacksonville at home, that's definitely a game that if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you look at and say, we could win. They also added some veterans on defense like Von Bell and DJ Reader from New Orleans and Houston respectively, and they still have a lot of weapons. Gio Bernard is getting the job done. Mixon, as I mentioned. T. Higgins is a nice young receiver that could really play. Their offensive line isn't very good. That's the one thing and the one concern for Cincinnati, and it's always funny when Joe Burrow looks at his teammates and just gives them that look of epic disappointment. I feel like if you watch the Cincinnati Bengals every week, you'll kind of know what exactly I'm talking about. But I do think there is some optimism right now for the Cincinnati Bengal team. Observation number 7. Even though Tom Brady played really well and threw 5 touchdowns, I'm not sold on him being this elite quarterback that isn't washed. That pick 6 in the first quarter of that game, Tom Brady, to me, looked washed. And I think he's a good quarterback, and I think the Buccaneers are a good football team. I just think Tom Brady is so good with his mind, and the only reason why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really ended up winning that game was because they're a veteran team with a veteran coach and a veteran quarterback who took advantage of a fumble, and if you're the Chargers, that's a big mistake. The Chargers are a team right now that when I look at it, Tampa Bay should have had no problem beating them because they have a rookie quarterback, and even though there's talent scattered all over the place, they're just a poorly coached team, and I do give Tampa Bay credit for at least getting the W, but I'm not sold on Tampa Bay being, this big-time contender in the NFC because they beat Carolina, Denver, and the Chargers. They need to do a little bit more for me until I see otherwise. The signs are there of them being a solid offense. I like to see Tom Brady spreading the ball all over the yard, but I don't think him, and Mike Evans have really picked up that proper chemistry yet. I don't think him and Chris Godwin have developed that proper chemistry yet. And Tampa Bay would show me a lot by going into Chicago on Thursday Night Football and beating a Chicago Bear team. And to me, the way it looked, if Tampa Bay is any good, they should have no problem doing it. But to be honest, I don't buy Tampa Bay right now as a contender to put in the same category as a Seattle or as a Green Bay. I just am not sure if their offense is going to be able to score with those guys. Right now, when I look at Tampa Bay, do I think they're the best team in the NFC South? Yes, but I think they're 9-7, 3 seed in the NFC type. I don't think they're elite or some kind of Super Bowl contender. I would put Seattle, Green Bay, and San Francisco all above them, Tampa Bay, right now. Speaking of contenders in the NFC, Aaron Rodgers could very well win the MVP. I feel like the media narrative just got way out of hand this offseason, or in the first 3 weeks of the season, when everyone was just talking about Russell Wilson has never received an MVP vote in his career. Well, yeah, because the only year really he ever deserved to win MVP was last year when Lamar Jackson clearly was the better player. And if anyone voted against Lamar Jackson, everyone would have just been like, what are you doing? That guy just doesn't deserve a vote. So I think the media has been pushing for Russell Wilson to get the MVP through first 4 weeks. It's 4 weeks. No one should be talking about the MVP. But if you're going to talk about Russell Wilson, I'll talk about Aaron Rodgers. This guy's playing with no one. Davante Adams has been hurt the last 2 games, and this guy earns wins over 2 very talented quarterbacks in Drew Brees and Matt Ryan. I'm very impressed with Matt LaFleur as well. I wasn't sold on him completely last year, but he is a very good football coach. He gets the job done. I think Aaron Rodgers in year 2 of this system looks really good. And to me, if you're asking me right now, who is the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs? I would say the Green Bay Packers. They have an elite quarterback. They have a really good defense. They have a really good wide receiver in Davante Adams. This dude, Bob Tonyan, coming on as a tight end. Aaron Jones, the way he's running the football. Right now, as much as I love Pittsburgh, I think my Super Bowl prediction would be Kansas City and Green Bay. Green Bay right now looks like the best team in the NFC to me, and we'll see what San Francisco is once Jimmy G and, Kittle's back, which helps, and Mostert, and we're going to get into that game before this segment ends, I promise. But those 3 teams look like, to me, the top 3 contenders in the NFC. I don't trust Seattle's defense for a lick. They had a nice win over Miami that we haven't spoken about them much on this show so far. But Aaron Rodgers is just playing at a ridiculously high level. I'm impressed. We will stay in the AFC North, and that is this. Nick Foles is not a good quarterback. Mitchell Trubisky is not a good quarterback, which means the Bears have a significant quarterback problem. It also doesn't help that these guys can't run the ball to save their lives. I like David Montgomery. I think he's a solid player. But Chicago's offensive line was just absolutely mauled by Indianapolis's defensive line in this game. And I wasn't sold on the Colts going into this game, but I was really impressed with their defense. Darius Leonard and those guys getting the job done. Props to them. But Chicago's offense just looked lost in this game. And if you watch the Chicago Bears-Atlanta Falcons game in Week 3, you would realize Nick Foles made like 2 or 3 good throws in order for the Bears to win that game. Chicago had absolutely no business winning that game. They had absolutely no business winning in Week 1 against the Detroit Lions. If DeAndre Swift catches that touchdown, if the Lions don't blow a lead, every week like they've been accustomed to doing over the last couple weeks, maybe we're having a different conversation about the Chicago Bear team. Allen Robinson is one of the better receivers in football. I give him a lot of credit for being able to put up the numbers he has been able to put up with the quarterbacks he's played with throughout his career. Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky, Nick Foles. But I just don't think Nick Foles is the answer for the Chicago Bear team. I think you saw Minnesota. Maybe they could turn their season around with a win over Houston that they got on Sunday. When you look at the Detroit Lions, they're 1-3, but we spoke about them already. They're not really going anywhere. I don't buy the Bears at all long term. And credit to the Colts. Phillip Rivers didn't play well at all, but they have a good offensive line and a good defense. And that's really how I expected them to be able to grind out wins throughout the season. My final takeaway is this. Dak Prescott may be having a better numerical and statistical season than Carson Wentz. I don't think anyone who watches football is going to deny that. But what I'll also say is this. I don't think Dak Prescott would have ever been able to lead the team that Carson Wentz was able to on Sunday Night Football against a defense like San Francisco and a team like San Francisco. And I know the 49ers were totally banged up, and the Eagles had their starting quarterback. But when you look at the rosters, Kittle was back for San Francisco. The Niners' offensive line was relatively healthy, and their defense is still really good and super talented. And you saw what they did in weeks 2 and 3 to the Jets and Giants. I know it was against the Jets and Giants, but San Francisco dominated both of those teams when basically their whole team was hurt. And Carson Wentz leads the Philadelphia Eagles into San Francisco and gets the job done. That was just super impressive. The throw he made to Travis Fulgham, wow, I was super impressed. And I totally understand this isn't the same Philadelphia Eagle team that won the Super Bowl, but they're a similar Philadelphia Eagle team to the team last year that won the division. And when they beat the Dallas Cowboys at home, that Cowboy team, if you remember in that game, was relatively healthy. Amari Cooper was taken out of the game, and Carson Wentz, when the Eagles were 4-7 last year, led a team full of nobodies with Boston Scott to the playoffs. And I understand it's one win, but I'll say this. I wouldn't be shocked if he does the same thing this year. Philadelphia's schedule is a little tough. They have Pittsburgh next, but their division is not tough at all. They still have to play the Giants twice. They still have another game against Washington. And ultimately, yes, the NFC East is probably going to come down to the head-to-head matchups between Philly and Dallas, but props to Carson Wentz for leading that Philadelphia Eagle team into a tough environment like San Francisco against a tough coach like Kyle Shanahan and getting the W.